Marcel, starting off, I just want to say thank you, being, a young Black man here in America. I'm 25, so seeing, someone young like yourself, educator, killing it on all fronts is something that's so needed. And I would probably say for my age group as a whole, here being in Atlanta, born and raised, we would get frustrated, so often because we wouldn't see people talking about real issues. It would be the same people being elected. For us, our Clyburn for us was John Lewis. And no respect to John Lewis at all, but you would see this older man in this high-ranking position every single year. He's being elected every single term, and it's always the same things, or basically reigning off of the civil rights era and using that towards his advantage. Yep. But seeing you, it was a breath of fresh air overall. So Marcel, man, before we even get started, I just want to give you your flowers and what's due to you. And I just want to say thank you because you're doing amazing work.
Thank you a lot, Caleb. And you're right. John Lewis, I know he's deceased now, but facts are facts. He didn't do nothing for Black Americans. He rolled his little civil rights legacy. And my thing is, okay, I'm glad that's your legacy. But now that you were in office, name one policy he pushed specifically for descendants of American slaves. All of a sudden you were a writer for descendants of American slaves during the civil rights, but now they don't need anything once you got in office. Now you're talking about abortions, illegal immigrants, and guns, and taking guns from people. But you in Atlanta with all that poverty that you see Black Americans there suffering. Yeah, so he was terrible, absolutely awful.
Wow. Yeah.
And him being deceased doesn't change those facts.
Nah. Hey, facts are facts, man. And again, you were bold, and you're doing something that is, to us, that should be simple, but a lot of people aren't doing it when it comes to doing something that is just something for your group that's specific for your group. So with all that being said, what inspired you to just take a stand up and say, I'm tired of this, enough is enough, I'm gonna run for Congress, I'm gonna represent my district, my state of South Carolina?
Well, you kind of already answered the question. I was tired of the way things were. Once I did research on my district, and I found out that my majority Black rural district in coastal South Carolina is the 6th poorest district in the United States of America, not just South Carolina, but the United States of America. It's the poorest district in South Carolina, but the 6th poorest district in the USA. There are 435 congressional districts in America. My district is number 6 overall for poverty. But when it comes to child poverty, number 3.
Wow.
Being going towards James Clyburn, but at the same time, I was seeing my people suffer. I was seeing a lot of my Black American students, even the ones that did all the right things, never got into trouble, went to school, made good grades, went to college, got a degree. I was seeing them fight the same poverty that their parents, my generation, is fighting, had fought as children, their grandparents, great-grandparents. I was seeing them end up in worse conditions than their parents and grandparents. I was seeing land that had been in Black families since the 1800s being sold on a tax sale, and some Black families not having the means to pay the taxes, or some being so impoverished that they felt the only way to get some money was to sell land that their great-grandparents and great-grandparents and grandparents and parents had struggled to keep in their family. And then I would see illegal immigrants, the ones that Clyburn and John Lewis are always making a big deal about, are always saying how they need policies, how they need citizenship, how they need protection. I was seeing those same people find land that our people never had opportunity to benefit from, but they were putting 2-story houses on them and living well. So I was seeing everyone else's wealth increase while seeing our wealth in real time regress, the little that we had. So I confronted James Clyburn. He wasn't the only politician. I confronted Pete Buttigieg. I confronted Tom Steyer. I confronted Joe Cunningham. I confronted Bakari Sellers. I
mm,
confronted Jamie Harrison. And I will ask all of them, you talk about LGBTQ. Every Black person is not gay. Most Black Americans are not gay.
mm,
Okay? Some are, but what about the ones that aren't? You talk about illegal immigrants. Yes, there are Black immigrants, but those Black immigrants are not descendants of American slaves. They're not
mm,
descendants of people that built this nation. You're
mm,
talking about white women getting abortions. You're talking about taking guns from people when Black Americans are still very much under attack, not just by these anti-Black bigots, these white supremacists, but also by the people who are supposed to protect us. In some cases, crooked policemen. And you're trying to say we need to give our guns up? No. But I said, what are your policies for us? None of them could ever give a direct answer. And matter of fact, some of them did not answer. So when I
mm,
finally confronted Clyburn, I said to him, you sold Joe Biden to us,
mhm,
40-year, 50-year-long anti-Black bigot who's responsible for putting more Black people in bondage that since the days of slavery, saying that we knew Joe and Joe knew us, yet
mm,
Joe has done somewhere at that time like 70-something executive orders,
mm,
not one for Black Americans, but for illegal immigrants, for
mm,
Native Americans, for Asians, for all these other groups, for Jews, but
mm,
none for the people who are responsible for putting them in office. And that's our fault.
mm.
And that man blew me off. He could not answer my questions directly. And then the next day, I saw him on TV still talking about other groups,
Mm,
LGBTQ, illegal immigrant. It's almost like he was going to show me that he was still not going to do anything for us. And I said, well, I'm going to show him. So
mm,
me, never running for office, never even had voted in my life before, outside of 2020, and that was just to not vote for Biden and Clyburn. Never had done anything with politics, being a very low-key person. I said
mm,
my mother and my great-grandmother have always said to me that don't ever ask why someone else is not doing something.
mm.
If you are capable of doing it, look in the
Yeah.
mirror and ask, why not you? So
Mm,
I said, you know what, why not me? And
mm.
I decided to run.
I love that. That's a great background story. And you basically highlighted something that is beyond important. I remember just growing up and being in college more recently and being around when Stacey Abrams was running for governor and seeing her say, I think she was on 85 South Show back in the summer, that she doesn't have a plan just for Black people, but she's doing
Mhm.
TikToks and she's dancing to rap and the hip hop and she's
Yep.
doing fish fries and she's at Black churches. Yet I'm not doing something specifically for Black people. Marcel, why is it always with our Black politicians, they want to shuck and jive, but when it's time to actually do something empowering, just not for people of color, but just for Black people, why do they always get so afraid?
Because they're cowards. They
Mm,
are absolutely cowards. Those are the same people that will be on the plantation saying, y'all won't make Massa angry now. All
right.
that talking about wanted to be free. You just know
Yeah.
now, y'all don't be talking all that. Massa's the folks.
Mm,
This is the folks. These are their descendants. Okay. This is not new for us. Don't, but you know what? Don't ask why the Black politicians get afraid. The question to ask, Caleb, is why we, the
mm,
Black voters, keep voting for them.
mm,
Case in point,
mm.
Warnock, who is, and I call him Warnock on purpose,
Yeah.
Warnock, who is absolutely despicably awful.
Mm,
As you can tell, this man had Herschel Walker, who can barely speak a complete sentence, give him a run for his money. If
yes.
Herschel Walker has given you a run for your money, a person that even other Republicans said is an awful candidate, if you had the struggle to beat Herschel Walker, that shows just how terrible you are.
Mm,
But that man, when I confronted him on camera and said to him, you said that essential workers deserve an essential wage. And I said to him, Black Americans, descendants of American slaves, are the original essential workers, but we were never paid our essential wages. I
mm,
have white people I know right now, even poor whites, who have been able to inherit land, who have been able to inherit homes, and you have middle class and upper class whites who right now are inheriting homes, stocks, bonds, companies, vehicles, all type of other assets that their parents have left them, their great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents. I've learned new phrases, Christmas funds and things like that.
Wow.
We never had that opportunity as Black Americans because our ancestors were never given the wealth they were owed. So we inherited the debt and the trauma. This is a man who talks about his parents being poor farm workers in Georgia. Don't use our pain and then be in the position to do something to address it, and you don't do anything, but you also refuse to do something. So this man had a rally in Savannah. I'm not far from Savannah. That's where I was born, and I lived right in Jasper County.
Oh, wow.
So I drove over the bridge and went over and do his little rally. This man spent 2 minutes talking to some white lady, babble, 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 about her dreams and aspirations. And when I came to him about reparations, not once, but twice, turned his back on me. So I grabbed my megaphone and I went ballistic. I called out how Black voters have been voting for the Democrats for the past 60 years. Of those past 60 years, the Democrats had full control over the House and the Senate for nearly 40 years. They didn't always have the presidency, but they always had the House and the Senate. And it wasn't until the 90s that the Democrats finally lost the House and the Senate. But from the 60s until the mid-90s, the Democrats had the House and the Senate. They did not do one piece of legislation for Black Americans to get compensation for the 16 to 20 million acres of land that was stolen from us, which is trillions of dollars in wealth. They did not do a damn thing to rebuild the Black Wall Streets that were violently taken from us, either by being burnt down, either by being flooded, either by having highways or railroads put through them, or either by eminent domain where the government just said, we're going to take your land, it's ours, get on out of here. And they gave us pennies, if that. Nothing. And they definitely didn't do reparations. HR 40 is not a reparations bill. They like to bring that bill up. HR 40 is a study to do about reparations for African Americans, which is a term obviously that I don't like. It does not, it's not specific to descendants of American slaves. It doesn't guarantee that we're going to get direct monetary payments, which we need at the minimum. But even with HR 40, HR 40 was introduced by Congressman John Conyers in the 1980s. The Democrats had the presidency, the House, and the Senate in the 90s. They could have brought that bill to the floor for a vote. Bring things to a floor all the time that don't pass. They try to use the excuse, well, they didn't have enough votes. They bring other bills to the floor all the time that haven't passed, but they still fight for it to get done. If you are a leader, your job is to not say we don't have enough votes. Your job is to get off your behind and get out there and go to the people and get the support so you can get enough votes. They have not. But I'll tell you what they have done. They've flooded our country with illegal immigrants. I'll tell you what they are doing. Right now, they're not even doing some of the basic stuff that the Democrats are supposed to do, like universal health care, tuition-free college university. They're definitely not doing reparations for Black Americans, but they're doing reparations for illegal immigrants. Joe Pro wanted to give $450,000 per illegal immigrant that broke our nation's laws by crossing our border illegally, and they were put in federal detention like they should have been. And they have the audacity to be suing our government. And Joe Pro has the audacity to say that if you were separated from your child, you deserve to be compensated. This is I don't even want to call it a man, but this thing is a man that wrote the crime bill that locked up and still has in bondage hundreds of thousands and millions of Black Americans, mainly Black men. They've been separated from their children. Like my oldest brother is separated from his 5 children. Yet, he doesn't even support reparations for the wealth we've lost from slavery, the Jim Crow, the redlining, the GI Bill, the Homestead Act. But he doesn't even feel that we should be compensated for the damage his bill's done. So the Democrats have no problem with reparations. They just have an issue with doing it for Black Americans. And they try to blame the Republicans. They try to blame Trump.
Mm.
This is on them. They had decades to get this done, and they haven't. Actually, Trump is the only president in modern history that not only gave Black Americans credit for building the nation, he literally said Black Americans built this country but never got credit for it. He also met with Ice Cube and came up with the Platinum Plan. Of course, that plan wasn't all of that, but the fact that he came out and said, this is something I'm gonna do for Black voters, that's a hell of a lot more than any Democrat has done.
Man.
And I ain't afraid to say it, and
Yeah.
no one can. I want someone to say they want to challenge me on that.
I love that. This is getting good. Marcel, you were down south, Southern roots. Myself as well, born in Georgia, great grandparents, family lineage here in Georgia. You born in Savannah, South Carolina, Gullah Geechee. How important is it for us, freedmen, foundational Black Americans, to take pride in who we are and to also make sure that we honor our ancestors' names by getting our just due right now?
It's very important. Let me tell you, I used to be, and still to some extent, I'm still very much as a kid, we were not taught Black history. And Georgia and South Carolina are some of the Blackest states in America.
Yep.
South Carolina was the Blackest state in the US from 1703 to 1956. There was no state in America blacker than South Carolina. The Great Migration, South Carolina was the #1 state that lost a lot of its Black population by going up to New York City and Philadelphia. Now, those people are coming back. My family were all in New York City and a little bit of Philadelphia. Now they're all back down south. After saying, I ain't never going back south. No, I ain't never coming back south. All of them are down here, including people in my generation. In fact, we try to get them to leave, and you can't get them to go back to New York City and Philadelphia. So South Carolina's Black population is coming back. South Carolina even did an article saying how this population is growing, not just because of white New Englanders who want to escape that cold weather, but the second fastest growing group in South Carolina, thank God, are Black Americans who are coming back south. So it's going back. But Georgia's the 3rd Blackest state. South Carolina is the 4th or 5th Blackest state in America. I used to be fascinated with ancient Africa because we weren't taught about it. Black inventors fascinate me. I love learning about Black inventors, and I'm never not surprised when I find all the things we've invented in this nation, even though we were denied an education since being in this country. We only got equal rights on paper since the 1970s. So we have been under inequality and racial injustice in this country far longer than we've had. We've just recently got an equality on paper. I don't think a lot of us realize that. Like those of us who are the 80s babies, which you might be as well, or maybe 90s baby, those of us, we are really just some of the first generations to be born in America with full equality on paper. I don't think we take enough time to appreciate that. I used to be fascinated with ancient Africa because I was like, well, those are my roots. And the moment I got a little bit of money, I was never doing well. But my mother said, you always want to treat yourself with your money. And my mother said, do something for yourself. And I always wanted to travel internationally. So the first big trip I took was to the African continent. I visited 6 nations, loved it. And I felt like I was getting more connected with my roots. But when I would go to these nations like Kenya, Nigeria, and I would tell people from where I am, people would say, oh, you one of those saltwater people. I didn't know that terminology, saltwater, which is what people call Gullah Geechee people, saltwater. And they knew more about, a lot about from where I was, and I would ever expect. I was fascinated by them. They were fascinated by me. So I realized that, yes, they have African roots, and I'm never going to be ashamed of that. But my roots, my homeland is not the African continent. My homeland is South Carolina, the Low Country, the Gullah Geechee. It's very important for us to honor that because after the Civil War ended, for what is it that our ancestors asked? They said to General Sherman, they didn't say, let us go back to Africa. Some of them were never from Africa to begin with because there were some Black people who have always been in North America, but all of them said, give us land, the land that we cultivated, the land we built. They didn't ask to go to no African country. They didn't ask to go to any other country because they already realized they built a nation. America was their country.
That's right.
So this is our inheritance. What a disrespectful thing it will be for us to be ashamed of our inheritance. America is our land. We are Black Americans. We're freedmen. The most important part of that is American. And we need to not let anyone make us feel like America is not our home just because some people in the American government have historically not treated us right. Yes, the American government owes us. Yes, we've been treated horrifically by people in the government, using the government, which really represents the government that was supposed to protect us, make sure we had wealth and equity. But that is no reason for us to be ashamed of America, a nation that our ancestors built, for whom they fought, even when this country was fighting against them, for whom they've invented things that have not just modernized our country, but have modernized the world. And when they had opportunities to leave, my great-grandmother, she visited many other countries, but she always came back home. She always came back home. She married a Jamaican man after she divorced my great-grandfather, and she could have gone to Jamaica to live with him. She said, I'm not leaving my country. That's the attitude we need to have. I ain't leaving my nation. This is our home. If any, the most patriotic American looks like you and I.
That's right. That's right. That's powerful, Marcel. And speaking on patriotism, learning about your great grandfather, I believe, who World War II vet, protected
Yes,
this
he's
country.
still alive.
Wow. Protected this country, fought for this country. So we have great grandfathers who fought in world wars, came back home, and he had to move to New York, correct?
Yes, he came back home and eventually he moved to New York City, and a lot of the men never came back. My great-grandfather, my mother's grandfather, never came back down south. He moved to New York City. He died there. This great-grandfather is my father's mother's father, and he moved up to New York City, and I doubt he's ever going to come back south
Wow.
because if he was going to, he would have. If the cold don't run them down here, that means they ain't never coming back. Now, the woman all came back home. My great-grandmother, she came back home. But the men, no, they never came back south. My great-grandfather is still in New York City. I want
Wow.
to speak with him about his experiences. I'm a little nervous because I don't want to traumatize him by making him probably relive traumatic memories, but I do feel it's important for me to hear those stories. It's important for white America to hear these stories. We always think Black Americans need to learn our history and hear what happened. White Americans need to hear this history. I'm never going to make the excuse for an anti-Black bigot. White, Asian, Native American, quote unquote Hispanic, white Hispanic, mixed Hispanic, or even of Afro-Latino. If you're anti-Black American, I'm never gonna make excuses for them. But some people really don't know the history of America. Like I was talking to this white lady and she was like, well, why should I pay for reparations? My people never owned slaves. And she was like, well, my family, they actually were a part of the Underground Railroad. First of all, yeah, right.
Man,
And
right.
right, yeah, right. But second of all, reparations doesn't come from any white person. They come from the federal government. The federal government does not use people's taxes to pay reparations. Matter of fact, if anyone knows how the economy truly works, the federal government doesn't use taxes, period, to pay money, period. Okay? And you want to prove it, that our country did an audit
Yeah, I'm gonna ask you that.
just this month, right? Just this month.
Failed it.
Pentagon from 1998, 2012, I believe, received $10 trillion from the American government. We just did an audit on them. They failed it. Not just once.
It was 5 times, right?
Not 3, not 4, 5 times.
Wow.
$8.1 trillion they cannot account for, which they cannot account. $21 trillion in transactions that they cannot say where the money has gone.
Wow.
5 times. That's just the Pentagon. That doesn't include all the other things for which we spend, the federal government spend money. Every single day right now, the federal government is spending $60 million a day to take care of illegal immigrants. But to the Pentagon's point, even though they can't pass their audit, we just gave them the largest budget we've ever given them in history. They got $859 billion, even though they failed their audit. No one is saying where this money coming from. Donald Trump sent out stimulus checks to everyone. Donald Trump increased unemployment from $300 cap to $600 a week. Donald Trump spent trillions of dollars in the PPP loans.
Yeah.
At that same time, America was spending $300 million a month to fight the war in Afghanistan and Iraq. Yet, Donald Trump cut taxes to their lowest amount. Why was he able to do that? How was he able to do that? Because Donald Trump knows, the Republicans know, the Democrats know that federal dollars do not come from taxes. So my point, I said to her, the money doesn't come from you. As a matter of fact, whenever this economy is starting to collapse, the federal government actually spends more money to get the economy back in shape. Roosevelt did it. I can't stand him, but Obama did it. Trump did it. And those things, economists have said, save the nation. But I said to her, even if your family were a part of the Underground Railroad, you're trying to say you are one of the good white folks, quote unquote.
Right.
Every time a Black person was lynched, the maggots that were out there lynching that Black person, men, women, and children, they aren't just to blame, but the good white people are to blame as well. The ones who sat in their living room and looked out the window and just watched it happen, but then they go out there to stop it, they're to blame as well. And I said, don't tell me they could not have stopped it. We just saw white people go and storm the Capitol building, okay? January 6th. We saw white people get guns and protest at state house capitals because they didn't want to wear a mask. Don't tell me that if they wanted to save the life of Black people who were being lynched and abused this nation, they couldn't do it. That's the first thing. And the last thing I said to her, I said that we need to understand, if they can do it to one group, it's only a matter of time before they do it to you. That's why I say it's truly justice for all or it's justice for none. Because if they can do it to us, it's only a matter of time before they get tired of this prey and they want to go on to catch a bigger trophy prize.
That's right.
We have to understand that. If you could harm one person and don't feel the need to ever do justice for them, it makes it that much easier for them to do it to another group. Don't ever think that this government won't turn on white people that people seem to think that they are immune from being attacked by the government.
That's excellent. That's excellent. And Marcel, so often hearing you, talk about reparations for Black America, to fix America, but then in a recent talk, I heard you say to actually save America. So how can reparations for Black people ultimately save America where white counterparts won't have to worry about being oppressed later on as well?
Well, that's the thing. If reparations do not happen, white Americans are the ones that are eventually going to be oppressed. We already see that our nation is as wealthy as it's ever been, and yet we have high levels of poverty, high levels of inequality, high levels of violence, high levels of people dying from avoidable diseases. People need to understand this country has done reparations many times before. Let's remember that reparations is not a new thing. They've done it for Native American tribes, several of them. They're technically still doing it for some of them. They've done it for Japanese Americans that were thrown in concentration camps. And before anyone tries it, some of those people had died. They put them in concentration camps in the 1940s. Reparations for Japanese that were interned didn't happen until 1988. I was 4 years old. This ain't no long time ago. Some of those people had died, so they gave it to their children or their spouses, or in some cases, their grandchildren. So don't try to give me that, well, yes, but they paid it to the people that actually went through it. No, they gave it to their descendants in case the person has died. We've done reparations for people who were taken hostage by the Iranians. We've done reparations for people in Guam who were taken hostage in World War II. We've done reparations, and we're still doing it actually, for people that were exposed to radiation when America was doing nuclear testing. And most recently, you probably heard about this, we're doing reparations for veterans that were exposed to the burn pits. And in the
Mhm.
case of those veterans being killed, their surviving spouse, if they have one, can get the reparations, or their next set of descendants, their children or grandchildren. So reparations is not a new idea. That shows this country has always acknowledged that if America is truly going to be a country of justice, then that means they have to repair what they have broken. In the case of Black Americans, to whom the largest debt is owed, at the end of the Civil War, the value of Black Americans, our worth alone, our bodies, just in the cost of what it would be to purchase an enslaved person and the amount of revenue we were generating for the nation, they said was between 42 to 84 trillion dollars.
Wow.
Okay, we never saw a penny of that. What we did continue to experience was land theft, lynch mobs, racial massacres, destruction of Black Wall Street, sharecropping, death to prisons, Jim Crow, redlinings. Some of these things didn't stop until the 1970s on paper.
Mm.
A study from Citigroup, which is the largest financial institution or one of the largest financial institutions in the world, they said that because of anti-Black racism, the United States of America has lost somewhere close to $20 trillion. The US is only worth $19.8 trillion right now. Could generate more money than that, but the GDP of the US is $19.2 trillion. So we would be at least twice as wealthy had we done reparations in the 2000s. If we had done in the 90s, we'd be even wealthier. The 80s, the 70s, the 60s, the 50s. So to all those white Americans out there that like to talk about how there are poor white Americans too, reparations is not an anti-poverty program. It's a debt that is owed to us by the federal government. Even if every Black American was wealthy, we will still be owed our money.
That's right.
However, some of these poor white people we have right now who work their fingers to the bone and are still barely making it, your life wouldn't be as hard had this country done reparations for Black Americans. One of my favorite people, Robert Smalls, you know, a Gullah Geechee icon,
Yep.
one of the first Black people to be elected to US Congress, he said in a speech on the floor of Congress in the 1860s, the Negro is here to stay. And he said to these white men, it is for your good that the Negro gets what he is due. I am saying the same thing to white Americans. Reparations is only owed to descendants of American slaves. However, it is for white America's good that it happens. It is justice for all or justice for none. We can't be okay with reparations being done for all these other groups, but have an issue when it's offered for the descendants of American slaves. We can't be okay with the government spending a lot of money, $10 trillion, to give 300 million acres of land to white Americans and European immigrants, but have an issue when the government is finally going to pay the debt to Black Americans. We can't be okay with the government giving trillions of dollars to white Americans who fought in World War II, but they excluded Black American veterans like my great-grandfather who is still alive and still remembers what happened, but they gave white Americans free healthcare, pensions, a free college education, where they can go into a profession and make six figures, pretty much gave them homes, gave them lands, made the middle class. The GI Bill was around like $2 to $3 trillion. But then you have an issue when they're about to do something for Black Americans. I can go on. The Labor Union Act, the Social Security Act, all of these things that were done where the government split checks and gave it to white Americans and excluded Black Americans. You can't be okay with getting money from the government when it's for every other group, but only have an issue and raise hell when it's going to the descendants of American slaves who are old. Is justice for all or justice for none? If Black Americans don't get justice, that means none of us going to get justice. And you know what? We don't deserve it. If we could be okay with another group of Americans not getting justice, then none of us deserve it.
That's powerful, brother. And again, you know, you being Gullah Geechee, which is amazing, rich history, South Carolina roots, you know, learning that South Carolina, Charleston, was the richest place in the world, cultivated rice, technology, engineering, all of these amazing things. How does it feel, or what are your own thoughts, right, when we have people who could move into America from Africa, from Nigeria, wherever, and sometimes say to us that we're lazy or that we have this great opportunity of being in this country, yet we built this country, we stimulated its very economy. It was rich off of us, and we still work hard till this day. So how do you feel about that sometimes when you hear those things?
A betrayal. People like to talk about, oh, all y'all reparationists do is talk bad about Black immigrants. First of all, that's a lie. We only talk bad about immigration as a system that has been used against Black Americans. If you check the history of America, it happened in Latin America too. They would sometimes bring immigrants over to make America a whiter country. The Italians and the Irish, when they first came over, white Americans from England and Germany hated them because they especially the Italians, especially Southern Italians, they actually said that Southern Italians were more than white. Yet they still treated them better than they treated us. And what did these Italians and these Irish men do? They would launch some of the worst riots against Black Americans, some of the worst race riots, racial massacres in history. And of course, our people fought back, but they were outnumbered. And they were also, these white mobs were given weapons in many cases by the US military, or were sometimes helped by the police officers who were supposed to be protecting Black Americans. So it's not that our people were cowards or one out there kicking behind, they were. But when you're outnumbered and outgunned because the US military or the police is giving the white mob weapons, our people, we have to do superhuman things, but we're still human. Italians, the draft riots of New York, where coward Italians and Irish were too cowardly to fight for America. So instead, they decided to target Black Americans. And the riots in Chicago and St. Louis, partly Italians, okay? So immigration has always been used against us. Then America imported immigrants to try to whiten America. Now we see we got these Hispanic and Latinos coming over here in large numbers. In one survey, it shows that 70% of Mexicans in North Carolina in 2006, done by Duke University, said that Black Americans were criminals, were not hardworking, were troublemakers, were not good neighbors. And that's 70%. White Americans in North Carolina, a state with a long history of anti-Blackness, only 15% of white Americans had those negative thoughts. So if we think white Americans have been anti-Black, wait until you hear how hateful some of these Hispanics and Latinos are, including some of the Black ones. And as far as these Black immigrants go, some of them come over here and they side with us, but too many don't. The fact of the matter is, Black Americans, we have been the true brothers and sisters of the Black world. When Ethiopia was under attack by Italy, Black Americans went over there. One Black American man, I think his name, I know his last name was Robinson. I forgot his first name. I think John Robinson. He went over to Ethiopia, took them and trained them to become pilots. That's how they have Ethiopian Airlines, one of their largest corporations ever. Okay, we welcome Africans into our HBCUs, and some of the first freedom fighters against European colonization that became some of the first presidents of African nations like Ghana and Nigeria, they wrote in their biographies, it's because of Black Americans and going to school in America and being around Black Americans that they were encouraged to fight. We organized to stop apartheid in South Africa by putting pressure on our government. We helped to stop the invasion of Mozambique and Angola by the white South Africans, okay? We raised money when the African continent was being neglected during the AIDS crisis. We raised money to help them have the resources they needed to fight the AIDS crisis because we knew that it was brought over to them by other people. We refused to invade Haiti when our country invaded Haiti. Black soldiers who put themselves at risk of being put to death refused to invade Haiti. So when these Black immigrants come over here, because of us, other groups can now come to this country. Because in 1964, one of the pieces of the civil rights legislation was the Immigration Act that allowed other groups, because prior to that, it was just really Western Europeans who were allowed to come here. The Immigration Act allowed groups from Africa, the Caribbean, Latin America, and more and angel to come to this nation. So these groups come here and are only able to have the American dream they enjoy because we've been fighting and going through the American nightmare. But when it's a Black immigrant, we used to think that because they look like us, they would be for us. Now we realize they might be our color, but they ain't our kind. That's a lot of them. Not only do they come over here, some of them, a lot of them, and say that we don't work hard, we're lazy, or we have no reason to be failing, or America's a dream country, and if you fail, it's because you didn't work hard. Not only do people have that very disrespectful, historically ignorant attitude, some of them run for public office on a platform of going against us. Like this really ugly guy in Michigan, extremely ugly. I think his last name is Chinge or something. And he ran for office in Michigan saying that the first thing he'll do is get rid of Black History Month.
Wow.
God damn dare you. That's not for you.
Wow.
That is something that our ancestors fought for us to have. The first thing he did, and the first thing he said he would do was get rid of Black History Month. We have, I think, 6 to 9 Nigerian Americans recently ran for office and won their seats. I went through each of their profiles. Not one of them said doing anything specifically for the descendants of American slaves, that they're over here benefiting because of us. They're trying to say that reparations should be for everyone Black. No, let me be very clear. The U.S. does not owe everyone Black. The U.S. only owes descendants of American slaves. I don't know if you've been following the issue with affirmative action, but on the Supreme Court, you got white conservative justices and you have Black Democratic justices, and even they're saying, you know what? It seems like affirmative action shouldn't just be for women and minorities. It should only be for descendants of the people who were treated badly by America. And those are descendants of American slaves. Everyone is starting to wake up and see that a lot of other groups come here and they leech off of our history while hating us at the same time. And yet, these groups will start organizations just for them. You can Google Haitian American organization and find hundreds of them that are only looking out for Haitian Americans. You can find Jamaican American organization, Nigerian American, Ethiopian American. They have no issues with doing things just for their group. But the moment we stand up just for our group, they want to spread lies and try to say we're xenophobic and that we're anti-immigrant. Hell with you and your lies. I am unapologetically standing up for Black Americans and making it clear that America does not owe everyone Black. America only has a responsibility to Black Americans. If a Nigerian or a Haitian feels that they are entitled to reparative action, Nigeria needs to go take that up with the UK, Haitian needs to go take that up with France. You don't come to America willingly and then say this country owes you too when you didn't have to come here. So it's a betrayal. I mean, I expect a white immigrant to come here and to be anti-Black American. That's disgusting, but I'm not surprised. But for a Black immigrant to come here and we look at them and expect them to be on our side, and they actually sometimes have more anti-Black American thoughts than the white immigrant or white American, that's a betrayal, and they are our enemies and need to be treated as such.
That's a good talk. That's a good talk. During voting season, especially this past time, November, Raphael Warnock here in Georgia, him and Herschel, honestly, I think that it was so close because Raphael, his whole campaign was just smearing Herschel, but he never talked about what he was going to do. And
that's why.
Exactly. So I would see whether it's our grandparents of our communities, the elders say, well, our ancestors fought for us to have the right to vote. As someone who is running to take a seat and to actually do something for us, how do you feel hearing that line so often of, well, we still have to vote for somebody because our ancestors fought for us to have the right to vote?
Their embarrassment to their ancestors. And I respect my elders, and yet we got, first of all, you know, in the Black American community, especially in the South, you know, we put our ancestors up on a pedestal, especially like our grandmothers and great grandmothers. We love our great-grandfathers and grandfathers too, but you know, there's something special in the Black American Southern community about grandmothers. Like our grandmothers and great-grandmothers can do no wrong. Like in my eyes, all you need to do, my mother, my grandma, my great-grandma, all you need to do is give them a halo, a pair of wings, and they're good. However,
Yeah.
we have to be okay criticizing our elders. Our elders did fail us to a great extent. Our ancestors didn't die for the right to vote. They were killed trying to exercise their right to vote. But that's just one little bit of the story. They also died for us to have land. We lost near none of it. And Raphael Warnock hasn't mentioned doing a thing about it. They also died for us to have good schools. We opened some of the most underfunded schools with some of the least amount of resources, from mental health to nutrition to updated technology to resources to take kids on field trips. Nothing Raphael Warnock has mentioned doing about that. And before anyone tries to say that's handled on the local level, hell with you. When the local government fails, the federal government has the responsibility to get involved. They did it with slavery, they did it with Jim Crow, and they can do it with anti-Black American hate. Matter of fact, after the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln in the 1860s was smart enough to realize that, you know what? We can't just say to these Black Americans, we're going to let the local governments take care of you at the local level. That's a local issue. He was like, no, the federal government owes these people a responsibility to make sure they're being treated right. If that was true in the 1860s, and we know Reconstruction didn't succeed, it's true now. My ancestors fought for us to have homes. We are 60% of the homeless, even though we're like 15 to 19% of the population.
That's right.
Our ancestors fought for us to have wealth. American wealth we're the only group whose wealth is heading backwards. 20% of Black families have a negative net worth. That means even if you gave them money, it will still just be to try to get them out the hole. Another 4.5 million Black families only throughout the year have $10,000 worth to spend outside of buying necessities. That's it. They said before COVID-19, by 2053, our wealth will be at zero. COVID came along, we might already be there. Yeah. Our ancestors died for us to get reparations, something Raphael Warnock refuses to even speak of. So to anyone who wants to say that we have to vote because our ancestors died for the right to vote, our ancestors died for us not to be in the position we're in now, wealthless, landless, no protection. And even though we have more education now than we've ever had, we are actually poorer now than we were during the days of Jim Crow. We own less homes now than we did during the days of Jim Crow. Our life expectancy is actually getting shorter. Our ancestors didn't die for us to be doing worse than them, and we are. So to those elders like to say that, you have failed your children. You failed your grandchildren, and you failed your great-grandchildren. My grandmother be rolling her grave right now to see we're doing worse off than she, as a woman born in Beaufort, South Carolina, in 1914, okay? And let me say to people who want to say, well, you only got two choices. We sound like a bunch of weak cowards. We are truly not our ancestors, Caleb. Our ancestors, the first thing our ancestors did after the Civil War ended, you know what they did? They ran for office. Could have just sat back and said, you know what? We're going to build this country. We're going to let the white people do what they're supposed to do and take care of us. We didn't trust them like that. The first Black person elected to U.S. Congress was Joseph Reed, right here in South Carolina, Georgetown, the home of one of my great-grandmothers, Anna Bly. That's the first thing our people did, ran for office. So if we have candidates and none of the candidates are that good or good for us or good enough, meaning they're not saying policies specifically for descendants of American slaves. And before anyone tries to say this country can't do policies based on race, please shut up and listen. Doing policy based on race cannot be done. No, but this country can and all the time does do policy based on lineage. Freedmen or descendant of American slaves, which is a freedman, this country can and has done policy before for us based on us being a descendant of American slaves. If we do not have a candidate that is offering those type of policies, then we don't say, for whom am I going to vote? We need to say, for which office am I going to run? If there is no candidate good enough for whom you to vote, then you run for office and you become the candidate that's good enough for people for whom to vote for. Even if you lose, the fact that you're putting the message out there will help you win in the long run.
That's good. That's good. Marcel, this is a powerful conversation. One of my last few questions, because you've been
Thank
gracious with your time, thank you, is being freedmen, right?
Yes.
So many times, so often in these debates for running for office, we hear politicians try to sound edgy by saying people of color or minorities, but you make sure that you differentiate and say freedmen, which is very specific, foundational Black Americans as well. Why is that so important? And not just saying African or Black or African American.
One thing I respect about white people in America, and I've taught many white kids, when you talk to them about their lineage, and let me be very clear, a lot of white people too don't always know their full lineage. I used to think they all did, but no, some would tell me I can only go back to my great-great-grandparent too. I don't know why, because they were able to keep records. But one thing white people do know, white people will tell you in a minute, French ancestry, I'm English, I'm German, I am Italian, I'm Irish. White people realize that you don't say white, that there's not just one big white family. They realize there are different ethnicities. Same thing with Black people. You got Jamaicans, you got Brazilians. In fact, Brazil has more Black people in the Americas than any other country. You got Haitians, you got Dominicans, you got Cubans, Panamanians, Nicaragua, you got Trinidad, you got Tobago, Bahamas, you got Martinique, you got Nigeria, Ethiopia, Ghana, Angola, you got Senegal. There are so many different types of Black people in this world. And in these African nations like Nigeria, you got hundreds of different tribes who look different, have different languages, different histories. There's not just the one type of Black. You see, the thing with reparations is we got to make sure that we get the language right. If we go to America and say, hey, you owe Black people because you treated Black people badly, they're going to say, okay, case dismissed. We can't do legislation based on race, first of all, but not just that. They're going to say, and rightfully so, we didn't enslave a Jamaican person. We didn't enslave an Angolan person. Those countries didn't even exist at the time of slavery. So no, your case dismissed. Your legislation is not constitutionally valid. The Supreme Court's going to throw it out. But we can prove that you did deprive of ancestor of a descendant of American slave of wealth. You did deny them an education. You did put them in debtor's prison after not giving them a home and charging them a fee for just standing around because they had vagrancy laws. You did do Jim Crow, which kept them out of many opportunities. You did leave them out of the GI Bill, the Homestead Act, the Social Security Act, the New Deal. Roosevelt was an anti-Black bigot. The New Deal, he wrote it to where people who were in the domestic labor and agriculture could benefit from a lot of the policies he had. And 98% of Black Americans were in those type of jobs. You did deprive us of trillions, probably more than trillions of dollars. That to me, if we try to include all Black people, the Supreme Court will have immediate grounds for throwing our case out. But when we do it by lineage, we can say we have proof that you did this to my lineage, and had my ancestor been able to get their wealth, the same way white Americans are able to inherit their wealth, I would have been able to inherit wealth. But my family had nothing for me to inherit because they were denied their wealth. And if anybody wants to argue against that, if anybody wants to say, well, you want a slave, okay, well, to those white kids that just got houses and cars and businesses and bonds, you didn't do that work either. So here's the deal. I'll give up my reparations claim, not really, but I'll give up my reparations claim if every white family out there gives up anything they've ever inherited. Give up your bonds, give up your company, give up your land, give up any payment that was paid for you for your college tuition, give up any car note that a family member paid for you, any down payment on a home, give it all up because you didn't work that. Your parents part didn't work for it either. Don't try to say an inheritance is valid for you, but when it comes to the descendants of American slaves, we don't have the right to get our inheritance. So we got to make sure we get the language right. There is no one type of Black person. I'm a descendant of American slave. You are a descendant of American slaves. You are a freedman. I'm a freedman. We were the people for whom the Freedmen's Bureau was established. Freedmen hospitals, okay? Freedmen Bank. Those things, freedmen, refer to our lineage. That was not for a Jamaican. We all have different cultures, different histories, different traditions and customs. That's a beautiful thing. And with reparations, it's a necessary thing to make sure that's highlighted in the language.
This is amazing. This is amazing. Marcel, on your page, seeing you, talk about being a Black male educator, which is needed because Black male teachers for myself saved my life. It was just always great being around someone who looked like us, talked like us, and just knew us. On your page, seeing you talk about learning about a student who had committed suicide. How important is it for us to have Black male teachers? And then two, how could potentially reparations save us in the school system as well?
It's not just important for us to have Black male teachers, Black female teachers, but it's important for us to have our own schools. Everybody's over here fighting these critical race theory. First of all, I've been a teacher for 20 years. Critical race theory doesn't even exist in K-12 schools. Critical race theory is something that's taught in law schools, certain law schools. What people are finally realizing is something that I'm surprised everyone did not know. People are making a big deal about some of these Republican and conservative ran school boards, like in South Carolina. Some of them have taken over school boards and are doing things like firing Black superintendents. I'm not losing sleep over that, and here's why. This is not new. They've been not teaching our history. Where have people been? They've never taught history accurately in America. So, and some people are trying to fight things at the local level. That's a waste of time. The Democrats should have long ago made Black history federally mandatory and made it to where every school has to teach it correctly. And if you don't, your funding will be at risk. That's something that the Democrats should have been done at the federal level. That's what I'm gonna do at the federal level. Make sure that Black history is taught accurately through all schools, and your funding will be depending on that. However, the most important thing, Caleb, we gotta get our kids back. Integration, this country should have definitely stopped segregation. Segregation wasn't just about whites there, Blacks there. Segregation was a system of violent deprivation of Black Americans who were paying trillions in taxes throughout the century and not benefiting from it. So segregation should have ended, but integration was the worst thing that Black Americans could have done. We gave up our own schools, our own banks, our own stores, theaters, doctors, everything. We need to go back to practicing group economics. Now, reparations is where we're going to get the wealth, because we do. Don't get me wrong. Black Americans, we do support each other. We like to have that old myth, we don't support each other. Anyone who says that, they just don't support you. And maybe you need to look at you and figure out why people aren't supporting you. Maybe they don't know about your business. Maybe your product's just not that in demand. Maybe they can't find you. Maybe a variety of issues, but we do support each other. I'm living proof that we do. But we need to go back to having our own freedmen schools. So I'm not going to be having my people in schools controlled by people who not just don't look like us, but people who don't have the best interests for us in mind. We need to go back to have our own schools. If Native Hawaiian and Native Pacific Islanders can get their own schools, and Native Americans get their own tribal schools, Black Americans, freedmen, we should be able to have our own schools too. One of the first things that the Freedmen Bureau did was that they started schools all throughout this country. Some of the HBCUs of today are schools that were started by the Freedmen Bureau. So my plan is to bring back Freedmen Bureaus, educated, managed by us. And sometimes we don't treat each other right either. So if one of us ain't treating us right, they gonna get on out of here too. As far as my student goes, my dear Devin, and I'm still pretty much processing that. He was an extremely sweet child, very sensitive, tall, athletic. I taught him in middle school, and then I had him for summer school. So I taught him when he was going through that weird puberty phase. He was always a very sensitive child, and he always felt things very deeply, but I had no idea he took his own life in 2018. I mean, this just goes to show you cannot judge people by outside appearances.
Right.
Because outside appearances, you would never think this kid would have any issues. I mean, he was tall, he was a very, very handsome kid, he was athletic, he
Mm,
was intelligent. You would think this kid had the best of all worlds.
mm,
And when his sister, who I taught as well, told me that he took his own life,
mm.
it took my breath away. And then when she introduced me to her two little kids, and my former students always want to show me their kids, and they want to let me hold their newborn babies. And she introduced her two kids to me. She had a newborn baby and she had a little boy. And when she said, "This is my son Devin," she named her firstborn after him. I about damn near collapsed because it broke my heart so bad. We
Wow.
are losing our children. For
Yeah.
the first time in American history, Black people are committing more suicide than white people. Our children are. And as far as other age groups, it's still white American, white men by far. And that's awful too. I'm not saying I'm glad white people are killing themselves, but at ages 5 to 12, Black children are twice as likely to kill themselves than white children. That
Mm,
has never happened in America, ever. And our Black boys, it's getting worse. You'll read a lot of articles about Black girls because girls are more likely to attempt suicide. But girls will usually still do things like take sleeping pills. People
mhm.
thought that the gap would close because guns are so much more available, but no, girls will still do things like take a sleeping pill, things that usually won't kill you. But boys, when boys go to commit suicide, they usually use far more lethal
Yeah.
means like guns.
Yeah.
And it's getting worse. And I saw this video of this Black man on a show with Vivica Fox, and he was saying to his mother, "I'm depressed," and his mother was not sympathetic. Vivica Fox was all right. Like, she was probably the most sympathetic one. Even she should have done better. But these other group of ladies over there, nasty, demeaning, and that's what happens. Black men, we're the most criminalized, we're
Yeah.
the most negatively stereotyped, we're the
Mhm.
most ostracized, and yet we're supposed to be the most resilient. We're never supposed to cry. We're never supposed to show any pain. We're never supposed to be angry. We're just supposed to sit here and be whatever punching bag society wants to make
Yeah.
us. Police kill you, you better not get angry about it. You better not break a window in a store.
Mm,
Don't worry about the police killing you. Just don't throw a brick through a store. That's the most important thing. A window.
mm.
If a woman is disrespecting you, you don't hit no woman. She can hit on you and beat up on you, but you don't have the right to defend yourself. If you can't find a job, as you know, a lot of Black men, especially in Georgia and South Carolina, use jobs like construction, brick masonry, roofing, drywalling. Illegal immigrants are doing those jobs now. But Black people be angry about illegal immigrants. You can't be mad about illegal immigration. You gotta support the illegals.
Mm.
For a Black man about to have a child and the woman says she wants to abort the child, the Black man will just shut up. People
Mm.
act like that's not his child too. You see, Black men will just accept whatever's thrown at them. I blame us for that to some extent because we too like to tell another Black man,
Mm.
man up. The most manliest thing a Black man can do is to speak truth to how he is feeling and to
Wow.
stand up for not just himself, but for the rights of other people, especially Black women, but it's also his fellow Black men. So if
Mm,
I see my Black brothers under attack, I'm going
mm.
to defend my Black brothers. And I mean that politically, that's the most important way, but even physically, I'm not going to let anyone attack my Black brothers, even Black women. No, you're not going to attack my Black brothers. No, they are not obligated to sit there and take it and be cool with it.
Mm.
No, we are not obligated to sit there and be chill, being bashed and ostracized and slandered by all these other groups. We have a right to exist and not just survive. We have a right to thrive. So my platform is Repair Black America. And now I say to save America. America is the ultimate object, but Black men are the most neglected, terrorized part of America. So you don't have to worry about me not having Black men's back. That's why I'm so unapologetic. Because Black men, we have not been unapologetic enough about being a Black man. We have not been unapologetic enough about ain't no one's allowed to harm you emotionally, physically, spiritually, mentally. But we seem to think that somehow we are supposed to listen to all these other grievances, like we've been the villains historically. Historically, Black men have been the biggest heroes in America and
Mm,
still are.
mm,
And don't ever let anyone judge us, Black men, by the worst of us. Of course, there are Black men that do horrific things.
mhm,
Um, you know, like there's white men, Asian men. You got,
mhm,
if you go to women, you have women of all groups too doing awful things. But no other group is judged by the worst among them. Damn it, they ain't gonna do it to us either.
mm. Wow.
Now,
Marcel, this was phenomenal. Great conversation.
thank you.
My very last question, again, you've been so gracious, is first of all, we're going to speak this into existence because it's going to happen. Next election, you will win. You will be Congressman Gregg Marcel Dixon. And when you finally
Thank
take
you.
that seat, what will you do for not only Black America, but the freedmen of America?
The first thing I'm gonna do is the thing on which I'm running. I'm going to do what Clyburn had 30 years to do and has never done. I'm
Mm,
going to write actual reparations legislation. I have a plan. For those who always want to say, where's the plan? Go to marcelforcongress.com and click on We Deserve Better. That's where I lay out my platform. And my reparations plan is the first thing you'll see when you
mm,
read it. It talks about how much, how we're going to pay for it, to whom it goes to. I'm going to write that reparations plan. I'm going to say this again. White Americans, reparations only goes to the sins of American slaves, but white Americans, I'm doing reparations for you.
mm,
Because if you are truly a patriot, the most patriotic thing you can do is to support justice for all Americans, especially Americans that don't look like you. If you want an America that's going to be in America that's going to be fair, then the first thing you should be doing is supporting reparations. And if you are an anti-Black bigot, if you are a racist who can't stand Black people, then you better be supporting reparations, because as soon as we get our reparations, is as soon as we can get the hell away from you, because we don't like you either.
mm. Wow. Marcel, that's a mic drop. Where can everybody follow you, support the campaign, keep up with you, all that good stuff?
Well, marcelforcongress.com.
Yes, sir.
It's FOR. And please, donations are important.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I I can't speak definitively, but I don't care what anyone says. I'm always going to believe that something that was not above board was done during the last election. But you know what's crazy, Caleb? I just don't believe that. Even people who won their elections believe that something shady was done with the votes the last election too.
Wow.
Y'all, in order for me to overcome that, we have to get so many votes that they are not able to scheme and dilute the number of votes I've received. And in order to get that, I have to get my name out there, because the truth of the matter is a lot of people still don't know about me in a
Mm-hmm.
small town. And some of my people in my small town don't even know I'm running for office. That is my fault to an extent. I've always been a very low-key person, and putting myself out there like this is very new to me. I've always kept a low profile, and now I am working against something that is against something. I'm working against my niche of keeping a low profile, putting myself out there. So spreading, tell everyone about me. If you're
Sure.
from, I don't care where you're from. You could be from Alaska. You could be in Alaska right now. Tell other Alaskans about me, because word of mouth is one of the best forms of promotion.
That's right.
And donations are important. I have to be able to run commercials. I have to be able to do billboards, yard signs, flyers, door hangers. I have to be able to pay for a team, pay my treasurer. So those things take donations. If we want, we can't complain about people not doing policies for Black voters, or Black voters being ignored. And then we have a candidate who is speaking to the needs of Black voters, all voters, but he has a special plan for Black voters, then you
Come
don't
on.
support them.
Come on. You
So
talking. You're right. Marcel, thank you. Stay encouraged, brother. You're doing God's work, the ancestors'
thank you
work.
so much.
Keep going. It's needed. This conversation, of course, will be saved and posted. So I'll share with you all the clips, all that good stuff. But just thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Caleb. Thank you for having me. You take care.
Yes, sir. You as well.
Thank you.